Hello, this is the first of several tutorial/demonstration videos whose purpose is to help students visualize and test hypotheses from this class's main textbook by Stemmon and Palmer. These models will help you see how different behaviors lead to evolutionary success over long simulated periods of time. This first model tests Stemmon and Palmer's hypotheses surrounding ancestor worship, a religious behavior they claim is a human universal. Now, before we get into what all these buttons and graphs do, let me explain the basics. As the model progresses, the agents travel across the landscape in search of resources, these green blocks here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, I'm sharing a little bit differently, but the green blocks in the map with all the people. When an agent, green or red or green, passes over one of these squares, they gain energy. Every time an agent moves, they lose energy. If an agent's energy reaches 0, it will die and be removed from the model. Agents will also die when they reach a certain maximum age. Evolution doesn't work very well on immortals, although I have been meaning to ask the chair of the anthropology department if evolution could have worked on immortals. That's why I said it doesn't work very well. Anyways, that was a joke rather than, don't take my word for it. Every 10 ticks up here, or movements. So every time a turtle moves 10 times, or I say turtle, that's the language of NetLogo, which is what this model is, the program this model is on. Every time an agent moves 10 times, every 10 ticks up here where it says normal speed, tick 0. Again, I hope you can see my mouse. If not, look around until you see ticks. It's at the top. Every 10 ticks, if an agent has enough energy to reproduce, they will reproduce and give their energy to their offspring. How many offspring an agent has depends on how much energy they've accumulated. So now that the basics are out of the way, let's get to the real reason we're here. In this particular ancestor worship model, we have two factions, the greens and the reds. Regardless of which specific behavior you set the model to, so hopefully you can see that, because these are the behaviors of the model. Anyways, we'll get to that. Regardless of which specific behavior you set the model to, the greens share their energy. So again, all agents collect energy from the landscape in the form of the green squares. The greens share that energy. If a green agent has more than enough energy to reproduce and is within a certain distance, an actual spatial distance on the map here in the middle, if they are within a certain distance of another agent that does not have enough energy to reproduce, that green will give up its own evolutionary fitness to enhance the other agent's fitness, a behavior known as altruism. Reds, on the other hand, do not share even if they are shared with. They mosey about the landscape, the reds do, collecting resources in order to reproduce and not starve. It is an unfortunate reality, but being selfish is actually quite adaptive in terms of evolution by natural selection. But which strategy is more adaptive, being selfless or being selfish? Being selfless or being selfish? I'll give you a moment to think what will happen after running this model for several generations. Will there be more selfless actors or selfish actors? Before I begin, look at the graph on the bottom left. Again, I hope you can see my mouse. This graph shows the percentage of actors from each faction, green or red. As the line goes up, there are more actors of that particular color than the other. Well, let's see who wins. But before I begin, let me just reiterate that when I have this set to purely altruist, which means greens share with everybody, this is when it is set to pure altruism. The greens share with everybody regardless of their color, whether they're green or red. And again, the reds share with nobody, regardless of whether they've been shared with or not. So which will win, the selfish or the selfless? Again, I'll give you a moment to guess. Once you have locked in your answers, we are going to hit setup. Now I can hit setup 100 times. Basically, when I hit setup, it is randomly inserting all of these settings into the model. And then you could hit go, which makes the model move once, one tick here, go, one tick, reproduce. But If you want to just sit back, relax, and let the model do its work, hit this go/pause button. There's a little, I was running out of space, but there's a little repeat button here. So if you hit this button, the model takes off on its own. Now, again, the more, I guess the taller the line, the more actors of that respective color there are. And it is not, well, who knows? It's still pretty early. Oh, that was another reproductive cycle that didn't bode well for the greens. Yeah. So this is what we would expect. Although it is being a little, yeah, it's pretty much over. You can kind of see, you can also slow this down so you can kind of see a bit closer what's happening. But over time and very consistently and reliably, the greens just went extinct after 35 reproductive cycles. The greens have been wiped off the face of this map. Well, that's a bummer. Over the time, the highly adaptive strategy of keeping everything to yourself results in more offspring and higher survival than being selfless. But this is where ancestor worship comes in. Stedman and Palmer, the authors of the textbook, hypothesized that ancestor worship is a human universal. There has to be a reason for it to be a human universal. That means it must have worked, and it still works. They hypothesized that treating non-kin, kin being family, so non-family members as if they were kin or family. So they hypothesized that treating non-kin as if they were kin by behaving altruistically with them is evolutionarily adaptive. Let me say that again. I messed up a lot. They hypothesized that treating non-kin as if they were kin is by behaving altruistically with them is evolutionarily adaptive. But it doesn't stop just there, because that's exactly what the pure altruists did. They shared with everyone and lost. So the greens here were pure altruists. That's what PA stands for. They shared with everybody, but they still lost out. Ancestor worship takes it a bit further. Ancestor worship encourages those who communicate their acceptance of the same supernatural claim to only cooperate with others that communicate their acceptance of the same supernatural claim. Again, I'll say, ancestor worship encourages those who communicate their acceptance of the same supernatural claim to only cooperate with others who communicate their acceptance of the same supernatural claim. The supernatural claim here, in a nutshell, is that people from all over share the same supernatural ancestor. And Stedman and Palmer say that this encourages people that share the same ancestor to behave altruistically with each other, to share with them. Again, ancestor worship, or the supernatural claim behind it, is that people from all over the world, or it could be the world, it could be the city, it could be the village, share the same supernatural ancestor. And Stedman and Palmer say that this encourages people that share the same supernatural ancestor to behave altruistically with each other, to share with them. For example, on a large scale, I was raised LDS and communicated my acceptance of the supernatural claim that God the Father was my creator, my literal ancestor. If I had gone on my mission, and I almost did go on my mission, I would be able to go to another part of the world and meet other members of the LDS Church that communicate this same supernatural claim and would readily behave altruistically around them. Being raised LDS, I was taught to treat other members as family. We all worked together. Other members, even though we're not genetically related, I was encouraged to treat them as if we were, to share, to work together, to be a family. I can't count how many times I helped another member move with a moving truck with 10 other LDS teenagers in tow. Now, ancestor worship doesn't have to be this large scale to work. In one of the videos you'll watch for the course, it's called Soul Bearers, people only come from across the archipelago to cooperate with their kin. Now, that's kind of a joke, but ancestor worship is very strong. It encourages people to go to great lengths to cooperate with other people that communicate the same supernatural claim that they share the same supernatural ancestor. I'm going down a rabbit hole that could last for hours. Let's just see how this plays out in the model. When you set the AW versus PA, this stands for ancestor worship versus pure altruism, to ancestor worship, like so, the greens only behave altruistically with other greens, meaning that they only give up their own evolutionary fitness to help the evolutionary fitness of the other greens, regardless of whether or not they are related by blood, by genetics. Let's run the model again and see if this strategy is adaptive enough to outcompete a purely selfish strategy. So I did AW, I have to set it up again, and let's hit go/pause. The models are random. We would expect random things to happen, but after a while, we also expect the model to take the effect we would expect. Wow, it's not even close. Now the greens are winning out. The red strategy is dying off. If I were to let this run much longer, the reds would go extinct. Wow, well, that has to say something. Chalk went up for being altruistic, for being selfless. Well, selectively altruistic at least. This model shows that being selfless on its own, when I set this to PA or pure altruistic, being selfless just on its own is not adaptive enough to outcompete selfish agents. However, being selfish, being selfless with others that communicate their acceptance of the same supernatural claim is adaptive enough to outcompete selfish agents. This ends the demonstration portion of the video. Please feel free to use the outcomes of this model and the rest of the models in the future to help you drive home your arguments in your module essays, your packbacks, your flip grids, as well as your final project. So for instance, if there's a question about the ultimate effect of ancestor worship, you can be like, well, the model showed that over, I don't know, this is 28 reproductive cycles. That means there were 28 opportunities for agents to reproduce. The agents can live to 100 if they don't starve. Well, don't take it too literally, but if you get a question about the ultimate effect of ancestor worship, you can say that, well, the model showed that over time, those who behaved religiously in terms of ancestor worship outcompeted those who did not, who were completely selfish. Again, this ends the demonstration portion of the video. And again, I want to drive this home because I would really love to see how this works out. Feel free to use the effects, the drawings, the graphs, the little people in the square in the middle as a discussion point in your module essays, your final project, your packback, your flip grids, any assignment. You'll notice that there are a lot of sliders and buttons and graphs. If you'd like to test different aspects of the model to satisfy your own curiosity, stick around. This is the end of the demonstration portion. But if you want to download NetLogo and really have a fun time, stick around and I'll show you what a lot of these do. So for those of you that just wanted to watch the demonstration portion, I'll see you on the next one. The next religious behavior is totemism. Hopefully you did watch this one because in the totemism model, I'm going to skip a lot of the basics of the model and really just talk about the differences between, or just how the specific agents behave. Anyways, for those who have stuck around and would like to see what some of these do, the first place I'm going to take you is to this resources to burn down slider. Depending on where this is set. Oh, is this not sharing? Okay, it is. Whew. I have my script pulled up, and when I clicked off my script, it said, this is paused. Well, we'll see. Hopefully this is sharing. Otherwise, you'll get take two. Depending on where this is set, you hit and after you hit the start fire button, the map will lose a certain amount of resources. Let me just show you what that looks like. So I put it to 47, I hit start fire, 47% of the resources are eliminated. Now they grow back because of the model, but this can help, well, I guess I'll read from the script. This will show the effect of food shortage might have on these strategies. 9 times out of 10, when you do this, the red population suffers greatly since they don't have a backup. They don't have someone to share with in times of food insecurity. Another slider, let me just pause this. Another slider that has a large effect on the model is this disregard level slider. In any society, there will be offspring that disregard the traditions and teachings of their parents and ancestors. The higher this slider is set, the more green offspring stop behaving like a green and become selfish. The ancestor worship strategy works best when everyone is on board. If you mess with the disregard slider, well, you can mess with the disregard slider to see what happens to the reds and greens when offspring stop sharing and go their own way. I'll show you what this looks like. I saw that pause again. So the higher this is set, the more likely oranges will appear. Oranges are those who have defected from the altruistic strategy of their forefathers, their parents. And this obviously has an effect on the greens population in total. Now, this is really high. So if I were to let this model play out, we would actually, I would expect for it to be this high, I would expect an extinction of the greens because too many of their offspring stop sharing with each other. And they literally lose a potential sharing partner to selfishness. That is if I were to let this run forever, but I won't. That's just what it does. Back to the script. The altruism cost and energy gain sliders are also quite important. When a green shares, they lose however many energy the altruism slider is set to, and the receiver gains the resources gained amount. The reason the baseline is not set to be equal is because there are many human behaviors that decrease the cost of altruism, one of which being the religious behavior Stedman and Palmer call sacrifice or involuntary suffering. Other non-religious behaviors that achieve this are alloparenting, reciprocal altruism, tolerated scrounging, etc. If you're not an anthropology major, these words may be meaningless to you, but just know that there are behaviors that exist to reduce the cost of altruism, and I guess just take anthropology's word for it at this point. Copy. If you set both of these to 10, you'll actually notice that the ancestor worship strategy stops being so incredibly adaptive. The strategy still works around 7 or 8 of this, but it takes a lot longer for the hypothesized effect to take, well, effect. Strategy still works, but it takes longer for the expected effect to take effect. The amount of resources consumed slider down here is how much energy an agent will gain and deplete from the landscape. So the landscape also has amounts of energy depending on how solid the green is. So this has more energy than this light colored green. And whenever an agent steps onto one of the greens, this is how much energy they consume and how much energy the plant loses. This could model several different things. The most pertinent here is how much resources will be left for offspring together. The two, now I got to shift my script to the left. I'm always honest. Oh, this actually works well. The two sliders on the right, or sorry, the two graphs on the right show food security and average energy. Now you'll notice from the last model we ran, reds are all over the place in terms of average energy. Sometimes they have a lot, sometimes they have none, sometimes they have really none. Then they go up and then down, up and then down, up and then down. But the greens are relatively steady throughout. Yeah, they have their ups and downs. I think this is when we started the fire. With less resources, we would expect there to be less energy, but they're a lot more contained, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what this graph here shows. This is the average standard deviation, or it basically maps the variation for both the red and green populations. If the line is below this black line, that means they have relatively less variation. They're more food secure. If it's above the line, then they have greater variation in their energy, meaning some of the reds might have a lot of energy, while some of the reds might have very few energy. And if you were to line this up, you do see some trends with explosions in green population are generally followed or preceded by dips in energy variation. And having a lot of energy doesn't always translate to more offspring. Like right here, the Reds had a lot of offspring, but right here, they're almost dead. So it doesn't always translate to more offspring, especially for humans. Lastly, losing the script. Sharing with Zoom is, okay, there we go. Oh, no, please. Lastly, oh, there's a button. Okay, hopefully we're still sharing. You're with me. Good. This is my first take, by the way. Don't judge me. I think it's been going quite well anyways. Anyway, lastly, if it wasn't clear from the demonstration, once you have toggled all of the toggles and slid all the sliders, I'll put that back to 3. That's how I run all my models. You'll hit setup to put all of those settings into the model. If you want to take it move by clicking it 100 times, you could just sit here and click go. I mean, if you really wanted to like follow one agent to see what's really happening, I would suggest doing this. But if you want the model to run freely, press the go/pause button. All right. Well, if you have any questions about the model, what do the buttons do? What do the graphs really mean? I would be more than happy to schedule a Zoom session to go over them with you. Thank you guys for watching this. If you've watched it to the end, you probably know how to run this model on your own. Feel free to download NetLogo as well as the Ancestor Worship and NetLogo specific model download. And I will see you in Ancestor Worship.